Alright, what's up everybody, this is Dumpster Cats. Welcome back to another video. In this one, we finally get to analyze our beloved card of Mosswood Dreadknight. Wizards finally officially spoiled it yesterday, I believe. And so we get to finally analyze it, lay our eyes upon it, and really determine if it is going to be playable in our beloved archetype, the Rock Golgari midrange. I think, long story short, this is an auto-include. It's a 2-drop that we've been needing and wanting for so long, it seems like, and I feel like it has the potential to really push our archetype in the Pioneer format. Stick with me. And now to quickly break down the card, it is of course an adventure creature, which means it has the adventure half and then the creature half. On the creature side, it is a 2-mana 3/2 with Trample. Trample being a pretty nice keyword to have, especially in a mid-range deck, just because if we need to be the aggressor, we can push through the damage, which is pretty sweet. Being a 3/2, it could trade up with a lot of creatures. Specifically, my mind goes to Bonecrusher Giant, trades with the cards like Pioneer, trades with Trespasser. It is a pretty fair rate, but it does not pass the Stomp test, dies to pretty much every removal spell under the sun in the Pioneer format. But luckily enough, we don't really care too much if it dies, just because if it does die, we can cast it from our graveyard as an adventure until the end of our next turn. And so, the adventure half, Dread Whispers being 2 mana, black instead of green now, we get to draw a card and lose 1 life. So, a lot of value attached onto this creature. It is a 2-drop that we've been lacking in our colors, which is really nice to have access to finally now. And yeah, it's a really sweet card. And so I think what makes this card extremely unique, and what I think is very crucial to understanding the power level of a card like this, is that small line of text. We get to play it as an adventure until the end of our next turn. So let's say, I think most oftentimes we're going to be wanting to play this as a creature in the early game. So let's say turn 2, we're on the play, we play the creature, pass to opponents, they fatal push it, abrade it, remove it, however, stomp it. They pass turn. It's our turn 3. Of course, we get to play the adventure half until the end of that turn. So we play Dread Whispers, draw a card, lose 1 life. We play like a Thoughtseize or Fatal Push, or we just play a tap land or whatever to finish that turn off. And then, of course, it's on an adventure. So the Dreadknight is going on an adventure, doing whatever he does on that adventure. And of course, we get to play the creature half, say on our turn 4 or turn 5, or just, whenever we want to in the future at some point. And of course, we could have that happen yet again. So as long as this card is not exiled, it goes on an infinite or seemingly infinite loop, right? As, many times we're able to cast Dread Whispers, cast the creature half, which is really sweet. It generates an insane amount of value. Of course, we have to lose a life in addition to drawing a card, which is a downside. But we have cards like Scooze, like Trespasser, and Shieldred being the most powerful one that kind of mitigate that negative consequence just a bit, which is very nice. And there are not very many cards in the format that exile just outright. The most popular removal spells, I think, are of course Fatal Push and Stomp, and those cards do not exile unless the opponent has a Misery Shadow or Kalidas if they somehow have that card, or a Leyline of the Void, right? And so if exile type removal or exile based removal is not popular in the format, this card is really insane, and of course can like we see on the screen, just go infinite, go on infinite adventures. And that's probably the most important aspect of this card to really understand how it works. Of course, it is very slow. That adventure creature cycle is a very slow cycle that can generate a lot of value, but we have to have pretty much 4 mana to get it going, which is a lot. And of course, in the Pioneer format, we have combo decks to play around, we have aggressive decks to play around, which oftentimes don't really care about us generating value. And so, we have to keep that in mind when considering analyzing a card like this. But nevertheless, it is very sweet, and of course, very cool. So right off the bat, a lot of people in the community are saying that this is our Blood Tithe Harvester. It is the Harvester of the Rock Golgari midrange, which I think is a fair comparison to make. They're both 2-mana 3/2s that generate some amount of value. Of course, they are extremely different in doing so. And we don't really care about them dying the turn they come down, or just dying in general. which, you know, is a fair comparison to make, but I think at that point we should really not compare these two cards to each other just because they are inherently different, they generate value differently, they interact with the board very differently, and so I think, you know, it's a fair comparison to, or it's a fair take to compare these two cards in the sense that they are, you know, 2-drops that are aggressive, they're, you know, have a power toughness 3/2, but I think the comparison should really stop, and, you know, we've been having to make this desperate take in the rock community of like, oh, you know, this recently spoiled card is our Blood Tithe Harvester. No, it's Mosswood Dreadknight. We have to focus on Mosswood Dreadknight. But other than being a source of value generation for us, which is very nice, it is otherwise just a 2-drop aggressive creature, which we haven't really had access to in our colors in, you know, the BGX archetype in the past, which is really, really sweet that we finally have access to, you know, a solid 2-drop. Of course, we've had Shadow in the past, which is a great, you know, playable card. I love it. But other than that, it's like Skooz, Deeproot Wayfinder, Armored Scrapgorger, which are all decent cards, but just they don't really cut it in terms of just being really efficient. And I think the most important aspect of Dreadknight as a 2-drop is that we don't care about it dying, and, you know, we really care about Shadow, Wayfinder, Scrapgorger dying, but if Dreadknight dies, we kind of really don't care, just because we can loop it, we can play the sorcery the adventure have, and just kind of loop it as a creature card advantage engine in that sense, which is really sweet. And additionally, it unlocks a kind of new aspect of midrange that we have been struggling with just a bit in the Pioneer format, which is being an aggressive deck. Of course, you know, if you've seen my most recent video talking about Questing Beast, you'll know that I think that being aggressive in midrange is really, really crucial, and I think that Questing Beast can help us out quite a bit. And I think, you know, that same theory applies to Dreadknight. I think Dreadknight being a 2-mana 3/2 with Trample is on rate, or even, you know, possibly above rate, which is very nice. We could push through damage pretty easily with that Trample. And so it allows us to be more aggressive. And so I've put, you know, Glissa, Shieldred, of course, QB and Shadow on the screen. We could put Trespasser on the screen as well. And now we have, you know, a pretty good team of creatures to really pressure our opponent. Of course, now that we have access to Dreadknight, we have 2 creatures that can generate us value, of course, alongside Glissa being the other one. And another aspect of Dreadknight that makes me really, really like it is that we don't have to rely on Shieldred too much to close off games. In the past, Shieldred was a really, really important card for us that we kind of leaned on a bit too much in terms of being able to close off games early and when we need to. But with Dreadknight, possibly with QB as well, being more aggressive will, of course, take the load off Shieldred in terms of needing her to close off games. So that is just another aspect of Dreadknight, which is very sweet, alongside the value generation. But there's always the question of, will that value generation just be too slow? Of course, I outlined you kind of need 4 mana for Dreadknight to really pop off. Of course, the only other creature, and pretty much the only other card that we really want to be playing in our archetype is Glissa. You know, that can generate, you know, some sort of value. We do, of course, have other cards like Bankbuster that generate value. Liliana can generate value. Even a card like Chariot can generate us value in just making more creatures, which is pretty sweet. But, you know, we don't have a very efficient form of a card advantage like Fable, like Harvester with the Blood token, like even Bonecrusher Giant, which can just be an inherent 2-for-1 by removing a creature and getting a creature yourself. Dreadknight being able to draw cards is great, just like Glissa does, but I'm afraid that it can be potentially a bit too slow. Of course, you know, I just outlined that Dreadknight can be a very aggressive creature to close off games. Essentially, though, what I'm trying to say is that 4 mana to really pop off with Dreadknight may just be a bit too much and just may be a bit too slow. There, of course, in the Pioneer format, there are a lot of unrelenting decks that kind of just don't care about value generation from you, of course, with combo and aggro being pretty prevalent. So that's a downside. Of course, this is kind of nitpicking, but we kind of need to be doing this if we're going to be wanting to be competitive, you know, with our deck. I think Dreadknight is really sweet, but of course 4 mana to really get it going may just be a bit too much. 2 mana creature that can trade up is really nice. You know, trades up with Bonecrusher, trades with Trespasser, which is nice, and trades with, of course, a lot of other aggressive creatures in, say, like Mono White or PNLR or Convoke. But, of course, that value generation, it's not as impactful as Glissa is, just in getting through the damage and drawing cards, where we can be aggressive and generate value at the same time. We kind of have to pick and choose what we want with Dreadknight, which is, of course, nice just because we do have that choice, which is inherently a good thing, but it may just be a bit too slow. But I think that about wraps it up for me in terms of analyzing this card. Of course, let me know if you think I missed anything in the comment section down below. Like I said in the intro, long story short, I think this is an auto-include in our colors, which is extremely nice to have access to. I think it is the best 2-drop that we have seen in the Pioneer format, in the black and green colors, of course. I think that alongside Shadow is where I really want to test it out. I think that Skoos is probably just a bit too slow, but having Dreadknight alongside Skoos could be a dream team that we've been wanting to have possibly in the future if like aggro and mid-range is pretty prevalent. But I think Shadow and Dreadknight are going to be our 2-drop creatures that we will be playing with and really trying to test out, which is extremely exciting. But yeah, of course, let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next one. Let's get the hype going for this card, and thank you so much for watching.